Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear stories of someone brave enough to bear it all. Let's get naked. Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. We're already making mistakes and screwing up and editing and pre-gaming. And I'm with Jess Campmans, and I'm super excited. Her website is jesscampmans.com. It's in her name. It's in the show notes. She's been on before. We talked about who she is, what she does, and her struggle. So that link to that podcast episode is in the show notes. But now we're doing a coaching call, and this is so exciting. Jess, jump in, please.
Well, I'm super excited to do this because I don't even know where it goes. Like most of the work I do, I just open myself up to be the receiver of the information to offer it to you. And what led me to this path was my own struggle with my horses, me not understanding what they needed to show me, and me having to want to get to the why of it. And that actually opened the doorway for my own psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, healing abilities, that helped transform me through my work with my horses, and then be able to offer it to people and their animals on the other side of me. So that's it in a nutshell. And I'm excited to be with you here today, Jen, to kind of give you an experience of it.
I love this. You say on your website that you're the bridge between worlds, and your story on how you got here. And also another thing that I really love about your story is I feel like you fought it pretty hard. Like you were putting the brakes on in a big way, and the universe was like, probably not. So you were in the process of designing tarot cards. Is that right? Oracle cards?
Oracle cards, yeah.
Based on horses that you've had. Every card was a horse. So tell us about that, and then just jump in. I'm ready to go.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, the horses, I kept getting messages from the horses, and I would write them down, and I would realize, oh my gosh, this is kind of like a universal message for not only myself, and it kind of came through very biblical. And I'll share that with you in a minute here. But essentially what happened is I've had more than 50 or 60 horses that I've bred and raised throughout my life since I was about 10 years old. And these horses all had this wisdom message that I feel was really wanting to come through. So I fought it for quite a while, and then I just started kind of tapping into those messages and wrote them all down for all of these 50 plus Morgan horses. And as I forget sometimes to use them in my life, but when I do, I pick one up and think, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And so if I needed to hear it, who else needs to hear this too? So that's kind of the basis behind it.
I remember.
And actually,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to show you them. This is
yes.
the outside of them. And then all of these pictures, because I love taking pictures, I've created an image that I have taken into a way that looks like it's a painting of them.
I remember, I'm glad you showed them, because that leads what I was interrupting you to say. When you were talking about it in your first interview, I was like, now, and this is funny, you weren't working with a full deck when we talked last. Now you're working with a full deck. So that's just my idiot play on words there, because it's who I am. But you didn't have them all the way done. And I'm like, do you have them? And you're like, yeah, they're not completed. And I was like, get them. And you left the room and you went and got them and brought them back. And I was so excited to see them. So as time has gone by and you finished the deck, because you had like a foal that was being born pretty soon after our interview. There were a couple. You knew who your last few horses were going to be for the Oracle cards. And so that's been done.
Well, it actually hasn't. So there was 4 foals that were supposed to be born this year in 2020. And I've realized within the last week that 2 of the mares that I thought were going to have foals actually are not. So that's the universe kind of handing me a different twist on this one more time. But that's okay, because I feel like whatever the end result will come this year. And those 2 foals that are still due, and there's more horses that I can pull from. So maybe there's other meanings that need to come in and be part of this deck. And I've also had an offering that I kind of started shortly after I had my interview with you that brings the stories of each of these horses to life. Because I just brought the wisdom through and the soul message from each horse. But then I realized, well, there's a huge part of their own story, like their story with me and what they helped me, what they taught me, that it actually felt really imperative to this whole project, I guess I could call it. So that
Yeah.
has been an ongoing thing. And me having to go back to my story with them actually has allowed me to find another whole realm of healing within each of the horses that I was maybe not avoiding, but not really tapping into on a more conscious level. And so as I've had to bring through the story of the horse, it's created a whole another level of dimension to these cards to be able to be applicable to, because when we read someone else's story, it strikes within us our own chord that is resonant to whatever that story is. And we actually tap into the transformation that happened in that other person's life, but we make the connection to our own life with it. So that's where I think this is just,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
So it,
every time I do a podcast interview, I'll walk out of the office and my husband's like, "Hey, how's your interview?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it was my favorite interview ever." And I mean, my whole family's like, "So you basically every interview you've ever done." And for the most part, over 150 interviews, there were 3 where I was like, "Well, that wasn't exactly the way I was anticipating that to go." So I've really loved them. But some people I connect with much more deeply, much more quickly, and stay in touch with. And you were one of those interviews. So I loved it because we had conversation after the interview through
mhm.
email. And tell us where you're located too.
In southern Alberta, Canada. So
Yep.
I'm just about an hour north of the Montana border.
Yep. Yep. So, I mean, we're not near each other really, in close proximity. I'm in Reno, Nevada, but sometimes you connect with people through video. And like as this is being filmed, we're in the middle of COVID-19 quarantine. Our internet's real sketchy. Thank you for being patient with that, everyone. There's a lot going on and a lot of changes. So I think people are realizing now how much they can connect through video and email and conversation. And you and I just did. I mean, we had such great conversations. So I love that. This is my favorite interview
I
ever.
know.
Hasn't even happened yet. So jump in with how you usually do this process and explain it in any way. And
Okay, so I'll start by giving it a little bit of a background. This just all of a sudden, kind of like you, like how I did with you, I am someone that loves to go deep right off the bat. And if you can't go there, that's cool. But you might not be a part of my life as much as somebody who is ready to just dive in deep and be 100% vulnerable. And that's you to a T. Because I've had to figure that out for myself, that the more vulnerable I am, the more authentic I am. And horses are an animal that they don't care how much money you have, what you look like, who you are, what titles you have behind you. If you're not being authentic with them, they're going to show you that in a way that mirrors it. And so that was my struggle throughout most of my life until I found this thing called equine guided learning and healing. And then I realized, oh, this is what's going on in my world. And so as I began to realize that, I opened up my intuitive pathways, and now I just can sit across from anyone. And I don't do it all the time, but if somebody is opening up to me, then I will allow my channel of information to open up, and things just kind of start happening. Like the age of 14 is coming up for you, so I don't know what that means, but I know when there's an age highlighted or something like that, that there is something that you went through at that point in your life. And sometimes it's not always an age. Sometimes that number might mean something, but it's actually 13 and 14 is being quite highlighted. And then so that's for, if you're like, I offer information, and then if you're willing to, and sometimes it doesn't always come through right away what maybe would have happened at that time. Sometimes it takes a little bit for you to be able to open up within yourself to that knowledge. So I guess let's just jump right in. Does that mean anything for you?
yeah, my mom left the husband she was with at the time. In my book about my childhood, he's called the monster. She had been with him 5 years. She left him 5 times. But this move, we moved from Rhode Island to Vermont, and we moved in with my great grandmother, who I always felt close to and always loved. And she was great. And it was the moment that I realized that if my mom decided to go back to this guy again, which had been the pattern, I would not be going with her. So it was a time in my life where it was a lot of transition, because I moved in Rhode Island. I was in the city, and I wore more makeup in junior high school than I did ever since then, and it was very much more a city type environment. And I moved to Vermont, and they were literally cow tipping. And I was very much an outsider. In Vermont, you're called a flatlander. So it means that you don't come from there, you don't belong there, which was interesting, because I'm like, the town right next door is my family's name, because when they came over on the boat from wherever they settled, like, I have generations and generations and generations in Vermont that helped settle that area. And I'm the
Yeah.
flatlander, because I wasn't born and raised in Vermont. So I felt very much the outsider. It was a huge, huge culture shock for me at 13 when we moved there. But I felt a tremendous amount of relief, because I got to live with my great grandmother. And I think it was the first time since I had been 6 when my parents divorced and things really started to go, off the rails. From 6 until 13, it was the first time I think I felt like I was going to be safe.
Yeah. It felt like you were taking back a part of your life that you didn't have any control over. And I would offer that, I don't know if your grandmother knew this, but she feels very psychically aligned. And so you had that connection with her, because I think I told you this on our last interview, that you do all this in a way that maybe you don't even know you're doing it, but you are tapping into things that maybe most people don't know how. And you're also enabling it through these interviews, which I think is fascinating.
Oh, that is fascinating. I love that.
Yeah.
I always
Right?
felt like I'm more of a thinker than a feeler, and I have a lot of feelings. If you do my personality and all that stuff, it's not that I don't, but I think I survived what I did growing up. And I think I survived 18 kids, having 18 kids and being able to do really well at that, because I'm really laid back about how things are unfolding. It's okay with
Yeah.
me. And I don't let a ton of stuff bug me. I don't always react exactly like I wish I had later on, but I do pretty well at that. I'm like, yeah, I didn't react very well. I'm really sorry about that, guys. But I'm also like, I'm analytical, so I don't allow things to hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's not about me. It's not very personal. So I never feel very intuitive, or I don't tap into that very well at all, is what I feel like. So the fact that you say that I just kind of do it on my own without realizing it makes me feel really relieved.
Well, because you want to be able to move it through your analytical mind, but how you pick things up, you perceive things because you're so laid back and unattached to it. Like, it's not a big deal, right? We come in this life, we leave this life. And part of it is we just I make mistakes, you're going to make mistakes. Hey, whatever. But with that, and I thought, like, I have 4 kids, so I kind of think, wow, you're like even one step beyond that, because if you can do 18 and think, well, I did the best I could with them, that's great.
Yeah.
Right. And we learned from them too.
Yeah.
But with that, you perceive lots of things, and then you move it through your mind to give to give a response. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I want to go back. That number
Yep.
you said 5 times, and that number 5 is a number of freedom and traveling. So at that point, that all kind of had culminated at the age of 13 or 14, that you were like, I need to find my freedom. And then you found your connection to your grandmother. And so something is, actually, it doesn't even feel like there's anything stuck. For most people who I connect with like this, they're like, oh yeah, no, that means something. And that was this. And then that is it, our energy field, what I call a disconnect, or just a disconnect, right? And by holding space for that disconnect, because when we're in some sort of trauma, we disconnect, our soul disconnects from our body or dissociates. And then part of us gets stuck in that situation with those people in that trauma. And so if we actually never return to there and reconnect that piece, I mean, you've talked to people that you know the outcome of what trauma does to people in their lives. And animals are not too much different, except for that they are reflecting traumas, like they go through their own trauma situations. But my belief is that the whole animal kingdom is here to help us evolve through finding compassion and that unconditional heart field. So actually animals' traumas, because in the wild, they will move through traumatic experiences. They will move it out of their body. There's lots of people that have done research on this. We as humans don't do that. We suppress it. We don't know how to move it through our body. And so the next step, the practical application, is that once we've found this disconnect within your aura, your energy field, your body, because they're all related, your emotions, your mental, is to hold space for that. And so yours, do you ever have or ever had problems with your upper shoulders or upper back? Or
my left one, always. It's always in pain. And I know it's something I'm holding on to, but it's not, I don't want to say always. That's very broad. I think I started noticing my shoulder probably 15 years ago when I was divorced, and I've been stay-at-home mom for 10 years, and I had to go back into the workforce, and my ex-husband was a dentist. So because I stopped getting my degree and supported him, and I have no regret about that, but I came to know dental offices really well. That was like my skill set at that point. So I went back to a dental office, and as a dental assistant, you sit and you lean on your left arm. And I always felt like the way I was sitting, I haven't worked in a dental office in 10 years. So, at first it seemed like when I was noticing it, and I didn't think at that point at all about the body emotional connection, like, wait, this could be me holding on to something. Now it causes me grief, my left shoulder, almost every day. It's part of my life. I know without a shadow of a doubt, I'm hanging on to something that's lodged there. And I'll go to the chiropractor and be like, you've got to adjust my left shoulder. And he said, every time, and I've known him for 15 years, I'm like, come on, fix it. And he's like, it's not skeletal, it's all muscular. And I'm like, do you have a zapper or something you can put on there? And like, and if my husband walks by and he massages my shoulders, I'm like, just the left one, just the left one. Oh my God. Like, it's so I know I've come to terms with the fact that it's there, and until I release whatever my body is physically holding on to that's emotional, why it showed up 15 years ago, or I didn't notice it before that, it was not apparent. And I really did. I remember noticing it, thinking it's got to be the way you sit and you lean as a dental assistant on your left arm. And that is when I first started noticing it. But yeah, that's not the reason anymore, because I don't do that. I haven't done that for a decade. So now it's just me hanging on to something I don't want to let go of, or I don't know, or I don't understand. So
yeah. And so I love all of your answers, because we have all of these things, and myself included, and I'm still learning this. With my own horses, I will go out to them and I will try to do something because I want to do it. And they will turn and give me a different part of their body to say, well, no, this isn't actually working for us. We want to teach you something. So then I have to get kind of upset with myself and like, I know this, why can't I just go there and be willing and open to learn? But we still have these pathways that we think, well, I want to be able to do it this way. So again, that whole going back to holding space for it. So with you used a couple words, grief, like it's causing you grief. And that's what I felt too, is that there's something in your lungs, because grief is held in our lungs. The age of 7 is coming up, that something happened around 7 that you weren't supposed to cry over, but you really wanted to. But there's some piece of that. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I can tell you what that is. Mm-hmm.
If you want to,
my parents divorced at 6. Is what? Go ahead.
It doesn't So the interesting piece about this that I've found is it doesn't really matter if I acknowledge it. All that it needs is you to hold the
Okay.
space to acknowledge it. So
Okay.
you don't even have to know what it is that happened in order to heal it. You just have to be open to be able to acknowledge it. So I know you're willing. And if
Right.
it comes to you consciously, awesome. Yeah. But just for anybody who's watching this, you don't
Oh,
need to know
good.
what happened. Yeah.
That's awesome. I do. I mean, I remember my parents divorced when I was 6. I was the oldest of 2 kids. I thought it was my fault. I went into 2nd grade. I was 7. And my teacher was really not willing to tolerate. She wasn't, I remember her as not being very nice, and she did
Yeah.
not want me to cry. I absolutely was not allowed to cry. And I hated school and I hated her class. I probably didn't really like her that much. Um, I had a really good friend in that year that I didn't know before, and I don't remember ever after that. And that memory of her is what I feel like helped get me through that year and not cry as much, because all I felt, I was just this little girl who thought it was all my fault and didn't understand and wanted to cry. And I wasn't,
Yeah.
that was not tolerated.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And so just having like, so I respond like my horses do, where all of a sudden, if there's a truth that's acknowledged, there's a release of a breath, right? You have to intake a deeper breath, because all of a sudden what we were holding on to is in our consciousness now, and we can acknowledge it and release it to have a realization, oh, that's what happened. That's what I was holding on to. So just in your own body right now, what are you noticing?
Uh, well, my shoulders are more relaxed. If I'm conscious of them, I know that that's where I've always felt like that's where I hold tension in my shoulders. I think a lot of people do, like you realize you're up
Yeah.
here. So because my shoulder hurts a lot, I'm very conscious of them. So I'm a runner, and in running, people hold tension there and they get really uncomfortable and painful and have trouble breathing. And that was actually never an issue that I had, I think, because I'm so conscious of my shoulder. I'm conscious of taking the what you're supposed to do is take a deep breath in, out, and release the tension. And so I've gotten good at that habit of doing that. But there are times, drinking alcohol is one of them, that I think, oh, I didn't realize I was holding tension there until I wasn't holding tension. So that's how my body feels right now. So it's
Interesting.
smaller increments for me. It's not like, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't realize I was tense until I wasn't anymore. So yeah.
Yeah. And exactly with that, because we don't realize some, just like I didn't realize lots of things until, oh my God. Well, if I was doing that, then that affects all of these other things, right?
Yeah.
Um, so just you even noticing that you've actually released even more because your head's kind of dropped. And like, I'm just recognizing and feeling it in my own body, because as you were talking, there was this line of tension that I could feel kind of running up and through here, because it was almost like bringing it to a resolution, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Another
yeah.
interesting thing that I think is connected, and I've always thought is connected, but I don't understand why I feel that way, is that I was on a running team and it was very competitive, and I don't really care about that, but we were being pushed and I was really overtrained. And what resulted in that is that I broke my foot and I was in a boot for 6 months. And a friend that ran with me a lot noticed my breathing, and there was a doctor on the team, so he was just like, can you run with us at some point and just listen and see if what I'm feeling is right. And at the end of that run, she came up to me and she said, you have asthma and you need to go and get checked. And I was like, mad, no, like, no, I don't. And she's like, yeah, the trouble that you're having with everything going on, like your time's not getting faster, you're actually getting slower, you're having trouble with training. Part of that was just that this particular coach was overtraining the hell out of all of us, and that was not okay. But my body was rebelling, and so I went to a specialist, and he's this old overweight doctor, and everybody in the waiting room's on oxygen, and here I am, like size 4 in super good shape, coming in to get checked. And he goes, I haven't seen anybody as healthy as you in 20 years. And I said, but that's not the issue. The issue isn't who you've seen. The issue is how I'm doing. And this is not my normal. And so I need to figure out, is there something actually going on in my normal, or I need to get to the bottom of me. Just because I'm not 100 pounds overweight on oxygen and can hardly breathe and I look like I'm going to pass out doesn't mean that I'm here because there's something wrong with me. So I don't care what the gauge is. I was really irritated. So his people, who were great, did all these tests, and he said, you actually do show signs of asthma when you're just sitting, like just doing nothing. But what we would call it is exercise induced asthma. When you get up to your heart rate at a certain point, your lungs just kind of tighten up. And so he gave me steroids and this inhaler, and I tried it, and I was like, nope, not the way I'm going. And fortunately, I've been good at following my body intuition. That part has not been super hard for me, but I just knew that that was not the answer. And so that was 6-ish years ago. And what I've learned since then is that I'm afraid to push myself, because I'm afraid of having it. Once I experience an asthma attack, I don't ever want to be in that space again.
Yeah.
But I felt like, yeah, okay, maybe I show signs that I have it, but this is not, either I'm hanging on to something and that's why. It's not like actually a physical illness or disease that I have, is how I always felt about it. It's a symptom of something else, and I can work through it to have it go away. I don't know if it has, because I refuse to push myself anymore, which makes me angry. So I know that that's potentially connected with my shoulders, because you said breath, and I'm like, yeah, well, by the way.
So, and I love all of this. And I have to find humor in it, because I've had to go so deep, and that when you're doing all of that, it's like the opposite of it is just to find joy in it, because there's always, right, we're always doing this. Like right now, I didn't even want to get on I'll be 100% honest. I was not that I didn't want to get out with you. I was just like, I have nothing to offer. I don't even know where I'm at right now. Like the whole state of the world that we're living in. So that I'm on and just engaging in it. Because I think maybe that's part of the lesson of right now too, is that it's not, we have no idea what it looks like, but if we just jump into it and embrace it, who knows what can come out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, actually, I have a couple tools that I use for all of my kids from the start of when my youngest was just a baby, and she could follow along, and she would, I call it brainwashing, but it's not like it is in the highest potential way that we can, I guess, use the word brainwashing. I don't know. It's kind of my joke with it, but with my animals, with myself, with my clients, with anybody that will listen to what I have to say, is that putting your hands over your heart. And so do you have the availability to do that right now?
Yes.
Because within there, so I just want you to, as I'll stop talking in a minute, as you're already starting to process something that's in there, because we're taught to push ourselves through things rather than surrender to receive the answer, right? And I mean, I've watched my oldest daughter, she's very athletic, and she will push herself because she needs to be the best at everything. And finally she started breaking down. And I realized, like I offered her, I said, your body is going to continue to do this until you can't do what you used to be able to do. So you either need to start listening to it and what it is trying to tell you. So if I just come back, what are you noticing right now? Or what is coming?
I'm super calm. You used the word dissociated earlier, and I remember as a kid when things were traumatic, I could remove the whole floating above yourself and walk. And I think that allowed me to walk away from people and things very easily. Yeah. Like if I decide I'm like, bye, and I'll never give you a second thought again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not a part of my personality I'm really glad about. So I try really hard not to dissociate myself, but I feel a little floaty, but it feels good.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because I think you put to words what most people maybe don't know how to, and that is really important. And so right now with that, because I believe we all have that ability to dissociate from when we're feeling unsafe. And so you're being super unsafe with whatever you're holding on to in here. So with one hand on your heart center, put your other hand on like the top of your thigh, so kind of between your knee and your upper leg, and that's going to help ground you. And why? Because in order to actually be super effective in the world, I mean, we can have all these ideas and thoughts when we're out here kind of floating above ourselves, but if we can't create our reality with that, that happens through being grounded, our energy being grounded into the world, then we can actually take an actionable step into our future. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
So how are you feeling right now? Do you feel like you kind of are coming back in more? And okay.
And I think I learned how to do that more with you. I'm allowing whatever happens to happen. Because I didn't like how easy it was for me to dissociate and how frequently I could do it.
Yeah.
So I tend to bubble that. I don't know how to explain it. I just don't allow it. But yeah. And it's a good feeling. So it's hard. I mean, it's good to separate yourself from the shit that's bugging you, you know? So, but I love that about putting your hand on your thigh. That feels really good.
Another thing you can do, it helps ground, it helps bring you back into your body, because the ultimate goal with trauma is to give our soul a safe home to come home to, which is this thing. It's our body, right? And you'll find, or anybody who's listening to this will find, that the more you create a safe home for your soul in this body, the scarier it actually becomes when you dissociate, because you realize you're not connected to the very thing that will support and protect you.
Which is interesting, because I think of it as the way I am supporting and protecting by dissociating. Well, that was my past.
And so it's kind of it's like a paradox, I almost want to say. And I've actually never gotten to delve into this, because this is always, I kind of talk it through with my horses and they listen and they offer me things. But then I wonder, well, if I'm actually going to share this with the world, I really have to be secure in what I'm doing with this. So I've had to come through my own experiences of this for myself, because I was completely dissociated after having gotten kicked in the head at age 7.
Right.
To be able to find that, to first of all realize that I was, and then find a way to come back home to me, so that I could tap into all of this information and actually use it to move forward in the world. And so by putting your hands on your thighs, or bringing your focus to the bottom of your feet, and right now I can feel the soles of my feet are actually really tingling. And so the more aware you become of that, then everything will kind of slow down. It's almost like reality slows down, but it's just because your brain waves are slowing down. You're creating more of a safe zone for everything to kind of come together. And so that's creating more of a connection for your soul and your body. And also, we actually don't need to know how to heal ourselves, because if we create this safe space for our soul to come home to, it knows what we need. And all of a sudden we get these ideas or these memories that come up, and what was unconscious becomes conscious, and then we can do something with it. We get to make a choice, right?
Yeah. And well, you said a couple of things. One, you said your feet on the ground. So I had my feet up on my desk. And when you told me to put my hand on my thigh, I put them on the ground, because I learned that in a meditation to be in touch with the earth in some way. And so mine were kind of floating a couple inches, so I did that. So that was good. And also you said that things seemed to slow down, which made me feel like I'm not going crazy, because that is what it feels like. Like, is my brain not working? What's going on? So that's good. If that means that that's creating the safe place, then when that starts to happen, you think, oh, good. So I was feeling that and not verbalizing it, but I'm really glad you mentioned it, because it does feel like for a minute. And if that's the acceptance back in, yay that you feel that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh,
I wanted to touch on something with meditation too. I hate it. I can't meditate because I feel like it's creating more of a, I have to have some sort of movement or some sort of grounding connection to actually get into a space that what I would call meditation, or tapping into like the 0 point field, right? Which is the potential of all that exists. And so if we're trying to quiet our mind, um, it's kind of like kids in school. If you want them to focus, they have so much, especially if kids are empathic, which we all are
mhm.
empathic because that's how we perceive to keep ourselves safe. They can't sit still because they have to be moving all of the energy that they're feeling in the class, everything that they had at a home going on, and they're all of a sudden expected to sit still. That's creating a whole bunch of anxiety and disconnect, instead of allowing them to move that energy. Because again, my oldest daughter came to me a couple months ago and she said, Mom, I think I have ADD or ADHD. I said, well, actually, I'll tell you why I don't think you have it. And that's exactly it. I said, you're empathic. You're picking up on all of the emotions that is happening in your own classroom. You're being told to sit still and focus, and you can't go outside. Like, you can't get up and leave to have to be able to move that energy through you. We're not allowed to cry because that's just a movement of energy, right? It's a release. So no different
Yeah.
than you at age 7, you had to do something with that. So you stuck it in you, right?
Yeah.
If you aren't allowed to release it, it's still there. You have to do something with it. So then we just shut it down deep inside of us and try and forget about it and go to the next thing. Okay, now I'm paying attention. It's somewhere deep within me. I'm really uncomfortable. And then that creates a dissociated state.
What a great hamster wheel we're on.
It is.
Okay,
um,
awesome. Well, let's not do that one anymore. How about that? What's interesting about the crying is that my next year of school, I had the teacher who, if I have to talk about people who are the most pivotal in my life, it's her. It was my third grade teacher for the first time. And this is why I think people need to be seen so much, like really seen, because she saw me. I was worth it. I was smart. I was beautiful. I met her 20 years ago. I went back and met her, re-met her. She didn't remember who I was. And someone was like, wow, doesn't that hurt your feelings? No, like, she was a teacher doing her job, but she was just being who she was. And she made this enormous difference in my life in passing. And I felt like I could release all that. I felt like everything that was inside me was totally okay. I didn't need to be embarrassed. There
yeah,
was nothing wrong with me. She's a huge reason why I wanted to do foster care, because I wanted to take in kids that were like me, that grew up like I did. Why I knew absolutely that you can make an enormous impact in the life of another human being, even in passing, without probably ever knowing that you did. Because she
yeah,
didn't know until I found her and went back, and I realized I'm telling everybody about Carolyn St. Jean, and the only person who should know is the only person who does not. So I found her, and I flew back from Alaska to Rhode Island, and I met her, and I spent the weekend, and it was amazing. And we've been in touch ever since. But she was pivotal, and I was so glad that I had a space that was safe for me. And I don't remember feeling like I needed to cry, because it was okay for me to at that point.
that's right.
Right. So I mean, I so totally get that. We stuff that down. And I had another experience my freshman year of college. My cousin, who was the same age as my mom, I didn't know this then, but I figured it out since then. She did massage, right? And she was like the wear Birkenstocks, hairy armpit, never cut your hair. Okay. That's Vermont. Welcome to Vermont. So, but she did massage, and I didn't know she did Reiki, and that meant nothing to me. But she did this, like, not even hour massage on me, and I felt a shift in my body, like physical, where it feels like it thumps. I love that now. I love when you can get that response where your body's like, yep, we're here and awake. Something
Yeah,
thumped and shifted in me, and I just knew I was going to be okay, and it was all right. And I remember crying like instantly. And I've had chiropractic adjustments where the adjustment's so big, like you cry, and I'm like, I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong. I don't know. My body's
yeah,
just. It was kind of like that. And retrospectively, I know she was doing energy work on me. back when I was 18, and that was my first experience. So I think you can have like these moments in passing that allow you the space to release things, like you said, without even knowing it. So I'm really thankful for those moments where I feel like, yeah, I was holding on to that at 7, but at 8, I didn't have to anymore.
Because you met someone
I
who
had this.
exactly, yeah, somebody held space for you
Yep.
to be able to take a breath and release it all.
Yeah.
And
What a gift.
yeah, it is. And I think that's who I always have felt. I mean, I haven't known you for a long time, but who you are. You hold space for somebody to be able to bring their story, share their story, and witness themselves in their story, all in a matter of who you are. You open that space for people to do that.
I'm thankful
And
because that's what I want to do.
yeah, and you do it because that's who you are. And I think we don't know the impact we can have, kind of like your teacher, um, but she changed your world by
Com-
crossing her path.
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, like my trajectory, things in my life got much worse in the home environment after 3rd grade, but I knew that I was worth it to her. Like I had such a firm foundation in who I was and that I was seen as an 8-year-old kid in 3rd grade, that although those were really, really hard things to get through and I needed to process through all of that, like I knew somewhere out there in the world I was worth it to this woman. Like she held space
Yeah,
for me. So I think in some way I tapped into her energy to kind of hold that space for myself.
that totally makes sense. Yeah.
And not entirely, because you still have to go through some of the really bad experiences you go through as a kid when you don't have control. So I needed to do more work on the other side of that. But it's so interesting that we can make such an impact to people. Yeah, she just held the space
But
and saw me. That's it.
yeah, that's a beautiful story. That's all you need to do, because you were able to get through all of that because one person believed in you. I had a lady that I met, and me being able to be this vulnerable and offer this has given me so many opportunities to meet people that I never would have otherwise. She owned um, a safari experience down in Arizona, and I was down there doing a horse workshop, and that I got to stay with her. And because there was fires there, everyone else, nobody else had showed up, so it was just her and I sitting there. And I one day came home from my horse workshop, and we just sat down and started talking. And what she shared and what I kind of tapped into and offered her as information helped her. But then she also actually told me that how they take kids in a week at a time from like inner New York and all of these places, that these kids are surviving by trying not to die. And there's like nobody understands what they're going through. And she said, at the end of the week, I have to send them home back to this experience, and I can't do anything. And we both kind of looked at each other, and we had the realization that, but she planted this one seed that somebody cares, because all of a sudden this person was seen as somebody. This person was seen as somebody. And I said, if that's all that you know in your heart that you did, that's invaluable.
Yep.
Right? I said it might change the
Yep.
trajectory of their life.
And sometimes, I mean, especially kids going through trauma, you have nothing to relate it to. I remember as a kid feeling like this is not how things should be, but I didn't have a comparison to that. Even though my best friend's parents were married and I would spend time at her house and they were upper middle class, we were like below poverty level. I didn't really have solid, regular examples of what should be different and how it should be different. But when you plant those seeds, you show them, one, that it is different. Like, you're right, you're not crazy. It shouldn't be like this. And what the possibilities are, and that it's possible for you. And maybe not right now. Like that's huge, because kids generally feel like this isn't the way it should be. It doesn't feel right to them.
Yeah. And with that too, planting that one seed will allow somebody to hold on to and hope that this will get better, regardless, because we have more strength. I mean, look at the shit that we go through, right?
Yeah.
I don't even think that I went through that much. I mean, I listen to people's stories and think, oh my God, and you're still here. Like, you're amazing. But you don't see that because you're the one going through it and you were
Yeah.
just getting through it. But then when you finally get out to the other side, wherever that is, like we have so much strength and resilience, and to be able to hang on to that one shred of hope that pulled us through, I think is, if we can use our trauma to then give hope to someone else, like
Mm-hmm.
that's,
Yep. That's right. And
it's a,
every person that I interview thinks that their story's not good enough. And it's so
yeah,
funny to me because I'm like, there isn't a story that exists that's not good enough. So that's the lie, the story we create in our minds, that
yeah,
somehow there are levels of, stories and ours falls below some imaginary line. It's really ridiculous. Because another person's story is something it's a horror we can't imagine.
mhm,
So I find that always is the case. And it's just interesting. So a lot of times now I start out with like, let me just let you know that your story is good enough. And I'm really excited that you're here. Like that part is done. You don't need to be concerned with that. Um, we compare ourselves with everything. Like my shit show wasn't as good as their shit show, so I shouldn't share it. And we're all in different stages. So what someone may hear at a particular time that resonates is not something someone else so you just have to share it. Carolyn St. Jean was just sharing herself with me. She wasn't doing anything
yeah,
extraordinary except being
yeah,
herself.
yeah,
We just have to offer that and let it fall where it may. And you can't be everything to everyone. So
no,
yeah, I think it's interesting that everyone feels that way. And for me, I was like, my story is just my story. It's really cool. I have a great story. I wrote a book about it, but it's just one. So my story is equal to anyone else out there. And the podcast was a way that you got to like write your book in an hour or share your story, because I already did it. So I'm not going to share mine again. I did. That was great. It was great. There's nothing wrong with
yeah,
it. But I wanted everyone else to be able to do the same thing because they're equal in value.
yeah. And I think that's where that whole holding space for it, for everybody who comes onto your show to realize, oh, I can take a breath because now I've actually shared my story. Because I feel like for most of us, that's kind of a first step, right? Wow,
Yeah.
somebody actually wanted to hear it. And then as we shared it, there's like a whole nother space that gets opened up for us.
Yeah. So, and that's what you're doing for people. You're holding my space in a way. And I know every energy worker, anyone in this field says the same thing. You're doing the work. I'm just facilitating, except I don't know how to facilitate for myself. So I know our internet's a little flaky. I
Okay.
can't be my own facilitator at this point in time. I don't have the skills or the know-how to do that. And so, yes, I understand that you're just creating the path for me to do my own healing, but without you creating the path, it still wouldn't happen. So you're doing that same thing. We do very similar things in a very different, unique way. You're holding space that I'm not able to hold for myself so that I can allow myself to facilitate that. And honestly, I'm like treading water and drowning without that. I'm not able to do it myself, right? If I try to,
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start or how to do it. So um yeah, that's really fun.
Hmm. Well, and actually, to kind of bring that full circle, I think that's a really important point. And there's been many humans in my experience and my journey that have helped be that for me. But if I didn't have my horses, I have honestly no idea where I would be, because I didn't like humans. I was terrified of them. There was no way that I was sharing anything or doing anything with them. And so I found that space through my horses, who facilitated that for me. And then I just had to figure out to understand their language of what it was that we were doing, right? And then as I began to do that, that opened up a whole nother world of being able to relay that this is all universal, right? Trauma is universal. And
Yes.
we each might have our own experience of what happened to us, but at the basis of it, it is all trauma, and it all is healed in the same way. It's reconnecting and bringing to light that wounded healer kind of within us, where as we become ourselves, that actually heals or offers a space of healing for everybody else to become their selves.
So can we talk about why my shoulder's holding pain and how to I mean, I guess I understand why. When you have a trauma, your body holds on to it in some way, all in different ways. A lot of people have anxiety or stomach issues or whatever. But so I think I've answered why. You can definitely throw in some insight, but how do we figure out what it is and move it through us?
Okay, I love that. And so we can talk about it or we can do it. And probably while we're doing it, we're still going to talk about it. So let's do that, talking about it.
Okay.
Um, so take it's your left shoulder, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, okay. So take your right hand
Mm-hmm.
and there's a space. And because it doesn't matter if it's on our back or our front, it's all part of our field of energy or body. There's a space somewhere on you that as soon as you blink, yeah, you've blinked a couple times, you'll find it. And it's kind of general and it's kind of relative. So if you kind of feel like, I'm getting that it's in that little indent area,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
does that feel about right? So you're just going to hold that and kind of relax into it. And you're not going to press in there. You're just going to hold it like you're holding space, like you're connecting it and holding space for it. So okay, yeah, I'm trying to look through your nails, but it's just a gentle, soft touch, like as if you were just doing this, right? As if you're going to do there.
Okay.
And so as you're doing this, you're crossing the midline of your body, which is helping connect both hemispheres of our brain to create a new neural pathway. Because it's connecting our midline, or it's crossing our midline, we're reconnecting a system that was disconnected. So our system is an electrical system that requires a feedback loop. And when that feedback loop gets disconnected, it just continues to try and feed back to us, but we aren't receiving the connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're reconnecting that feedback loop. And I'm having to take a deep breath. And right away, it's either going to start tingling or going numb. Yeah. So you just had to take a deep breath. And I feel like the fingers this is my left hand, on your left hand, you're going to start to feel kind of a different sensation in them.
They're really cold.
Okay.
Okay.
So actually with your left hand, there's something I want to say. So with your left hand, bring it to your right thigh. I want to say your right knee, but that's almost putting you in too much of a position to stretch. So just put it on your right thigh.
Okay.
And just breathe into that for a minute. And so your breath right now feels really and sounds quite shallow.
Tight. Yeah. I don't feel like I can get a deep breath.
Okay. Is that just right now, or is that kind of natural part of your everyday living?
I don't know. I know that when I take a deep breath, it feels amazing. And I will, and my husband will say, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing. I'm just breathing. It feels great." So I'm very conscious of those really deep breaths. That might mean that I don't take them very often.
Okay. So you can release the hand on your thigh and move it actually back to your left side, because it's like your body is really wanting support on your left side right now.
And that does feel better.
Yeah. What did you break?
Now I got it. My left foot.
Okay. So just keep breathing. And there's an image that feels like it's coming, and it's coming to me that I'm getting a sense that you might get an image, but it might come through a different pathway of informing you. Is there something that's coming to you right now?
Nope. But I'm good at blocking.
Okay, so with not your shoulder hand, your other hand, put it on the back of your head, like at the base of your skull. Yeah. And you're just going to kind of hold that there. Because some part of you is stuck in fight, flight, or freeze still, which is blocking you from receiving the information that will help that.
It was awful to leave my kids when I went back to work. I remember the image was leaving my daughter, Gabby, who's 19 now, at a different daycare than her siblings. And she was like the sweet, intuitive kid. She has anxiety now. She's just, I used to call her the tender, sweet young thing. So I tried to spend a couple extra minutes with her. It was really, really hard. I felt like I was abandoning my kids. And their dad went to prison. And we got divorced, and I had to go back to work. And I was working like 3 jobs for a while. And that's the image of the kids and dropping them off and stuff.
Okay, you can take your hand away, because you've effectively actually just removed that block. And that's pretty powerful. I've got goosebumps all over my bottle. Oh, there you are.
Yep. I know that the internet right now with COVID-19 is really flaky. So.
Okay, so how are you
Well, it makes me really sad.
feeling right now?
Sad, really sad. I feel like I abandoned them, and I didn't, but logic and emotion don't play well in the sandbox. So I was surviving, and there were 8 kids at home, all under 12, and their dad went to prison, and he had been a doctor and I had been a stay-at-home mom, and that in an instant changed. So I did what I had to do.
What you had to do.
Right. I mean, there was nothing wrong in what I did. Also, I had moved to Nevada, where being a stripper is a career, and prostitution's legal like 10 miles down the road, or like just outside of our county, very short distance away. And I had offers to do things like that and to be an escort, where I could have worked 2 or 3 days a week at night when my kids were asleep, spent all my time with them, and not had to worry about money. And I worked 3 jobs instead, because I felt like, and this is nothing against people who did it, it was very tempting. It was really tempting. I felt like my moral compass, if my kids found out what I was doing to make money, I didn't want them to ever have to learn that. And so it was because of that jobs that I could have done easily on my own, I worked 3 jobs instead and didn't spend time with my kids. And I battled with that, because it, give me a pole and a stage and I'm cool. That wouldn't have bothered me to do it, but it bothered me internally. And the money was tempting. There's lots of things that were tempting about the offers I got. Yeah, and I never did. And now we joke about it. I told my kids, like, I was offered this job as an escort to like go on dates with men and look pretty and all that stuff, and do it on the weekends. And I would have made just a killing. And you guys probably wouldn't have known. And they were like, why didn't you do it? That was like, oh my God. Because focus, guys, focus. We would have had to go to daycare. We could have hung out with you more. You would have made a ton of money. You would have worn pretty stuff. Like, what about that seemed like a bad idea? And I'm like, oh my God. Well, sorry, but so we do joke about it. I'm like, in my alter ego life as an escort and prostitute. And I had a friend who's like, have you ever had sex with somebody? And you were like, I wish I had that 30 seconds of my life back. I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, imagine you at least got paid for it. I was like, oh, that's the best argument for prostitution ever. God, you make me want to do it now. So, I really had a lot of internal moral battles. I stopped going to church that I was going to, and I felt like I was, it's like triathlons. Why be good at one sport when you can be average at 3? I felt like I was failing in every part of my life. Like I couldn't be there as much for my kids. A boss always wants more of your time or your energy. I was spread so thin. In every aspect, I felt like I was just fucking it up to some degree or another.
Yeah.
And my kids that was the hardest part, was feeling like they went from having me full time to having me very
Yeah.
little and going to date. Like, it was such a shift in my life. And I don't think I don't like to use the word regret, but that time period, being molested and raped, and there's all this stuff I've been through in my past, that was probably the hardest for me.
It does the words "got stabbed in the back" kind of
Oh,
resonate at all?
yeah. Oh my God. So I'm married. Not that it was utopic, right? But I had, it was a blue collar IRS issue. And I told him for 8 years, I don't disagree with your value system, but I do disagree with how you're following out. We have little kids, everyone's home. If this ever goes criminal, I'm going to leave you, because I disagree with what you're doing and how you're doing, not the motives behind it. I 100% on board with that. But everything else I'm not in alignment with. And not only did that not make a difference, but he hired an attorney in another state to write letters like to the IRS. I believe what you're doing is unconstitutional, and until you prove otherwise, I'm not paying you. So he was being confrontational to the government. And when that all came down and the paperwork came, it was like his name versus the United States of America. It was like, it was very sobering. And I just felt like, I said, well, you've let me know that your cause is more important than your family. And you've clearly made a choice, and you've been making this choice for years. And now it's kind of time to pay the piper, sort of thing. And so, yes, I did. And in the year it took for everything to be processed, we went to therapy for a year. And, then he went to prison, and I got letters. I getting divorced, and therapy was not helpful. And the letters that he sent were like, I can't ask you for forgiveness until you know. And it was basically all the lies in the marriage, that it's astounding to me that you can live in the same home with a human being and realize you don't know them at all. And why would you go through so much effort to do that? And I felt like I would have been open to have discussions about any of these things. They would have been hard, but here we are now, but I was totally willing. But he felt like I was this is not an incorrect assertion, but I'm a very strong personality, and he didn't feel comfortable talking to me, which is a great justification for not doing something, right? Blame me. Well, I would have talked to you, but you're an asshole, and you're too strong of a personality, and I couldn't. And I knew that was a cop out. But basically, after a year of therapy, and he's in prison, and I'm working 3 jobs with 8 kids at home, he writes me these letters about all of the stuff that we just spent a year in therapy. So stabbed in the back was definitely, like, I was not the priority at that point. And he really wanted to stay together, and he had all these conditions on it. And I was like, absolutely fucking not. Is that ever going to happen in this world? Like, I'm really sorry, but I did my part on the front end. I did a year of therapy. I was very present. And yes, stabbed in the back is definitely how I felt. And so I was in that situation, not of any decision I made or any, like, I couldn't change it. I couldn't fix it. I had nothing to do with it. But I had to, I said it to him I've said it to him on a couple occasions, actually, with another situation too. I'll think of it if it's important. But I took the brunt. I had to deal with the fallout of someone else's decision and couldn't change it. And then this was 15, almost 15 years ago, 14 years ago, that he went to prison, and we got divorced. And 5 years ago, there were still 6 kids under the age of 18. And of those 6 kids, 3 of them reported that he was being abusive. So I did, at this point, I've got like 18 kids, total, because I just kept going on my own. And I had conversations with him about, if you feel like you can be a really great parent 10% of the time, be a great parent 10% of the time. Don't be a lousy one 50% of the time. And I don't even know why I said that to him, because I had no inclination there was physical abuse going on. And it's been going on for like 6 years. And the kids finally came forward and I got full custody 5 years ago. And he says that they're allegations and they're not true. And I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. But I had these 6 kids in therapy, letting them release everything that trying to hold space for them to release this trauma that they had lived through. And I was so pissed because I grew up that way. And my whole goal was to make a difference in the life of a child. And I did 12 years of foster care and 3 years of training foster parents. I have 18 kids one way or the other. And now my kids got to live through the exact thing that I was removing them from. Like, where's the cruel irony in that? And so I, again, with the same person, felt like that may be why it bothers me more now, because it was a second round of having to pick up the pieces and deal with the fallout of another person that had nothing to do with my choices. So actually, I just verbally vomited all that on you.
No, that's what happens, because you probably haven't been able to bring that all together in a way that has just come out like that, right? Yeah.
Nope. I would have never thought stabbed in the back from 15 years ago, but that's very accurate. And that I had to pick up the fallout of another human being. And then the same thing happened again 5 years ago. And so for 5 years, I've been dealing, I had a couple of kids that tried to commit suicide. I mean, like, I have all of this training. I have enough training to train people at the highest level of foster care. And my kids were the ones with a suicide attempt. And he did that to them. And I'm picking up the pieces and dealing with his fallout when I was there the first time around. Being a strong personality or not, I was there and willing. And I was there and willing the second time around because I had made comments of like, yeah, if you need a break or you want to switch the schedule or you want me to have 80% instead of 50-50, like whatever you need on there, I will support you in that, because it's all, the bottom line is the relationship you have with the kids. And that's not based on 50% or 100% or any of that. It's based on your relationship with the kids. And even though I felt that I needed to say that to him, from my kid's account and not his, he was physically abusing them. And I've been in therapy with them when they've wanted me to, and I don't doubt my children. So yeah, my shoulders definitely like, it definitely feels different, that's for sure. But yes, yeah. And I would have never put those two things together with the same person or in that way.
So another interesting piece to this is, and I've kind of recognized it a little bit with my own kids, and you can probably attest to that, is the thing that we want to protect our kids from the most is actually the thing that they have to live through. And so when I kind of realized that, all we can do is be there for the fallout, right? Yep. And be the one that says, these are the tools that I can give you to find strength through what you went through, because it's already happened. I can't protect, right? Even if we try, whether we don't know or it doesn't matter. Like, as soon as, and that's, I think, where people struggle with, okay, my kid's 18 and they're leaving home and I don't know what to do about this. And let's go backwards in time, because they actually probably have left you long ago, and you have no idea what's going to happen when they walk out the door or when you walk out the door.
Right.
So to empower them, and that's what I feel like you have done for your kids, and maybe on a not so conscious level, but when you can provide them the support and the tools with, I went through this is how, like, I'm not using it to, or I'm not dealing, this is how I'm dealing with it, I guess, right? And this is how I'm taking my life, and this is my perspective, and I'm giving this to you guys because I want you to be able to be empowered in your life, regardless of what happens, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And so with that, even though it feels like you've been stabbed in the back, that you actually have the tools, I sometimes work metaphorically, is to pull the knife out of your own back and hand it back to the person that it did, because you know how to, this is all imagery, but touch that space, heal it up, and move on even stronger because you have that strength within you. Because you held space for him too.
Yep.
I'm holding space for you to find what you need. But when somebody can't find what they need within that circumstance, you can only hold space for so much before it's exhausting and it's draining. And until you take the knife out of your back and give it back to him metaphorically, which already feels like if you kind of made some connections in what you just talked through for your own self, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would have never, that is not at all where I would have gone with the pain in my back. Like I honestly didn't know. I knew that there was a reason and I knew it was me holding on, but I had no idea what the connection was. So yeah, it's definitely a very strong connection for me. And I love that you just said that I held space for him. I absolutely did. I mean, I did a lot of the negotiating with attorneys. I was his power of attorney. I negotiated his dental license in 2 states and like all of this stuff. I sold the house. I was good at it. And it didn't bother me to do that stuff. I was actually glad in the heat of that I was the one that was able to get all of that done. It was very empowering for me. And you are right in how you said I was holding space for him. And it was when I couldn't do that anymore. Like I've done it and I don't have the capacity because I couldn't hold space for the kids and myself and for him. I didn't have the ability to do that. And there's no way I'm going to let go of myself or the kids. I mean, there wasn't even a question of what to let go. And I didn't want to anymore. I didn't feel for him enough to want to hold that space for him anymore. So, yeah, I love that. When I was done, I was done. It was the same thing 5 years ago. I mean, I would have told you before that we parented pretty well together. We were still good friends. And I think that was very true until it wasn't. And so, I could only hold space enough. Like he would have had to allow me to do that. He would have had to drop back to 20%, or he would have had to admit it and come to me. Like I offered holding space and it wasn't accepted. And so I didn't do it. And it would have been easy for me to do that part for him because it was all about the kids. It wasn't really about my relationship with him. It was his relationship with the kids and my relationship with the kids. And he didn't allow me to do that. So I just put my focus on the kids. Yeah. And the thing about kids moving out, I am like, because my oldest daughter's 28. Out of 18 kids, we have 2 at home now. So I've done my time. I've gotten them. And that is like my favorite part of their lives. One of my favorite, every part's my favorite part. It's like interviews. But it's so exciting because they're becoming the person that they can. It's like you fed the little bird and now you're like, out of the nest.
Go free.
Yes. And they're going to make mistakes and I'm their safety net. And I know that I'm here if they need me to. I mean, my daughter called me last night and I had to drive and help her out. And that was totally okay. Because when you need me and if you need me, I am here, but you need to navigate this on your own. And I love how, like, I am not friends with my kids at all when they're younger, but as they get older, then it shifts where I'm still always their mom, but not only their mom. It becomes this very unique, beautiful relationship. And I didn't hold my own identity on being their parent. It was just part of who I am. So then moving out, I don't have empty nest. I don't think, what am I going to do with myself? I don't have any of those issues most people do because I think it's so exciting and fun. And I'm done holding that space for them. Now I get to do it in a different way. But yeah, I love that part. I have a daughter graduating this year and I'm like, oh, do you need boxes? Like, how can I support you in this? Because she's got it all figured out and she wants to move out. And I'm like, you go do that.
You got it. But I love what you just said. And I think like that ties back to exactly what you're doing. And I feel like what I'm doing, how can I support you in this? I have all of these tools. Which one can I give you? If it's not the right time for this one, I'll just put it away. And I am holding the space to support you. You let me know what you need, because if I tell you what you need, that's disempowering, right? And that's what's so beautiful about how this can all work. And it doesn't matter how we're doing it, that's who we become essentially, right? Is how can I support you? Because I have found what I need to support me. which you did inadvertently, right? You took this life, you took all of the things that you were given, and you made this amazing podcast. And like, you've done so much more than that, but I'm just using that as an example, to be able to share all of these things that all of these people have found as a way to become more of who they are, to not only support themselves, but to support everyone in the world that they meet. So I think
I
it's just
love
kind of
that.
yeah, that's how I put words to it. Like, this equine guided learning is a modality. And then I realized, but this is actually my life. Like, I live my life in this way. I live it as a parent, I live it as a spouse, as a facilitator, as a friend. That's just, I've become that because that's who I would want. That's who I needed way back when. I became the person I
Yeah,
needed, right?
exactly. Well, and that's what I love about the podcast. And when I made the connection that 100% of entrepreneurs, they birth their business from their struggle. It's a direct
Oh God.
correlation.
Yeah.
Right. And so we all have this desire to take someone else's experience that's traumatic or difficult and make it faster, easier, and more supported.
Yeah.
It may be bigger than that, but basically we want to ease that for someone else because that's what we wanted when we went through it. So we do it in very different ways, but essentially, I mean, that's why I wanted to do foster care. I wanted to be what I needed when I was them.
When, yeah.
Yeah, you'll see that repeating. That's a great place to kind of tie up, I think. Is that if people start recognizing them in themselves, what they're trying to do for others is what they needed at their time of struggle. Is
Mhm.
that a good way to say it?
That is a perfect way, I would think, to say it. Yeah. And actually, to bring it all back to the initial thing,
Yes.
I noticed that when I picked up the cards, and whatever card I showed you
Okay.
was one of my black mares, just to bring it all kind of full circle,
Yes.
because that's how I feel life kind of works like that, right?
Yeah.
Was this horse. Her name is
Yeah.
Karma.
Oh.
um,
Of course it
and
is, Jess.
and I in my mind, as I showed you the card, I didn't even know who it was, and I recognized her as I put it down, and I thought, that's interesting that out of all the cards that I could have showed you, it was that one. So I feel that sharing her experience of coming into this life, she was not, her mom was in distress, going into labor. And when a horse is in labor, you're losing either the mare or the foal or both of them. And 99.9% of the time they will foal on their own. This time was not one of those times. So really long story short is that I lost Karma's mom because she heard the words that we were going to have to trailer them to a clinic, a veterinary clinic, to be able to do a C-section to save the foal. And upon hearing those words, she started pushing and pushed all of her guts and everything out, called prolapsing, right? You
Right.
push
Yep.
so hard that everything comes out except for the baby. So at that point, I realized, oh my God, this horse knew exactly what was going to happen and thought, like, it's either both of us or one of us, right? So, and I still get chills when I tell this story. So the vet and I decided, well, it's here now. Let's save this baby. So we pulled her out, and she wasn't breathing. And I started doing human CPR on a horse because
Wow.
I was not ready to lose this little baby. And so she's here today, and still with me. And I lost her mom that day, but that was one of probably the first experiences I had where I realized that there's a whole lot more to this entire thing than maybe we ever really give credit to, right? Like, that horse knew exactly what was going on. And in the end, her sister, this mare who died, her sister adopted my little baby, just like she was her own. So within 2 days of me bottle feeding and transitioning, this mom took her under her wing and raised her as her own. So it kind of speaks maybe a little bit to your story.
Right.
And then this past summer, I had a group of girls out here, and Karma had her first baby during this girls' workshop that was all about empowering yourself, like finding the superpower for who you are and what's within you. And we went for a walk and we came back, and all of a sudden this baby's standing there, and she'd just been born into the world. And none of those girls had ever seen a foal being born, let alone one that had just come into the world. And Karma, being a brand new mom, let this foal march right up to the fence and introduce herself within minutes of being born to every single one of those girls. And it, like, this just is so crazy. And so that's what I wanted to bring it back to, was Karma's, because it feels like, I don't know offhand what each of these horses' wisdom is. Sometimes I remember them, most times I don't. Oh, is to evolve, right? To help us evolve. Because Karma was born with 2 legs that were super crooked. So she actually walks around with a leg like this, which most people would have seen that and put her down right off the bat because she would have been deemed useless, right? But I knew that there was something quite a bit older and more part of her. So if I can read that quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we have time? Okay.
Yeah.
Is not the greatest challenge in life that of remembering who you are, to come to understand that what you are perceived as, or what you have forgotten, is but a drop in the ocean of your life, meant to be part of the flow of the waves. You are not the outside world looking in, you are the inside of your world looking out, and when you collect and gather all the drops together and bring form to the wave, the vastness of what was and what will be creates the momentum for what is. You are an enigma of timelines brought together as one, carrying with you the secrets from the depths and bringing them to the surface and to the shores, meant to be the catalyst and transform the formations of what has been. And so her invitation is, so this is kind of like the core of it. You have come here as a change maker, as a catalyst. What you know need not be justified, but instead return to help evolve.
I'm going to definitely be percolating on that. Jess, thank you so much. People will be able to buy your card sometime soon, right?
If you just continue to check back on my website, I will, as soon as they're ready to be purchased, that will be up and out there.
I cannot wait. I'll be one of the first in line to get them. But thank you so much for today. This was pretty amazing for me, but also it gave people an idea of who you are and how you do things and what the connection is with the horses. And I'm really grateful for that.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful for you and being able to be here, and that this ended up being amazing, like it always does.